Is David Doss, candidate for State Senate 52.
Well, thank you, folks, and good morning, and it's always a pleasure to be in Bartow County. My name is David Doss, and I want to be your next state senator. I'm running for this office because I share many of the same concerns as you do. I'm concerned about the direction our country's headed. I'm concerned about the direction our state is headed. And I think that my past experience as former county commission chairman in Floyd County, as former chairman of the State Transportation Board, gives me a unique perspective and a unique set of experience to be your next state senator. From the beginning of this race, I have made several things I think that are key focal points of this election. First one is back in January, one of the first speeches I gave, I think it was the first speech I gave, I made a promise that it's time that we return public confidence back to restore public confidence back in the legislature. As you know, in Washington and in Atlanta, public opinion is at an all-time low about our elected officials. And that's because there is no confidence, because Georgia ranks almost last in the nation as far as ethics bills and ethics legislation. We recently gave a report card of an F. One of only 3 states in the United States that allow unlimited gifts from lobbyists to legislators. So I made a promise in the very first speech that I gave, that if I was elected on the first day, that I would introduce the bill that is sponsored by the Georgia Coalition for Ethic Reform, which is an interesting coalition of folks, from the Georgia Tea Party to League of Women Voters to Common Cause. It's an interesting collection of folks. But I would introduce that bill, and regardless of whether it passes or fails, I will live by that bill. You have my word. Until it becomes law for everyone, I'll live by that bill. You may have received a robocall yesterday from my wife, who's on the back there, talking about ethics reform. If you hate ethics, if you hate robocalls like I do, I apologize, but I think they're just a necessary evil of this game of politics. But nonetheless, it is one of the focal points of this race, restoring confidence in our elected officials. Tax reform. Georgia's tax code has not been revised since 1939. 1939. We have one of the most antiquated tax systems in the entire country. It is full of special interest tax breaks, dozens and dozens of special interest tax breaks. They're bought and paid for by the lobbyists that will fight me for ethics reform. What people need to remember is, every time there's a special interest tax break, all of us that are in the taxpayer's line, every time somebody gets out of that line, the rest of us have to pick up that share, or the state goes without that revenue. My plan is a total top to bottom rewrite of the state tax code. I want us to eliminate most, if not all, of the special interest tax breaks, and leave only those that apply to all of us. And by doing so, if we did that, we would expand the tax base. It would allow us to reduce the tax rate for everybody left in the paying line, and generate more, while generating more revenue for the state. Let me give you an example of what this has done. It has bled our state treasury down to where we really can't hardly operate this state anymore. Education. The state of Georgia has cut funding in education $4 billion. And it wasn't just lately. It wasn't just since the economy went bad. We can't say, well, you know, it's just been the last 3 or 4 years we've had a tough time. The last 10 years, they've cut public education in the state $4 billion. Now, you know, I'll tell you, I have a problem when we're handing out special interest tax breaks to folks like Gulfstream and Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, to build the World of Coca-Cola museum. Let's give them a special tax break so we won't charge them sales tax on their construction materials. I don't know if y'all built anything lately, but if you had, did you get a special tax break for your building materials? No, you did not. But Coca-Cola Company does. I have a problem that we're furloughing teachers, and we're shortening the school year, and we're continuing to undermine public education, all while handing out tax breaks to the folks who can afford them. I think that's wrong. I think it's time we stop that. I want to talk about something that's a little bit closer to home. I know y'all are aware of a lady by the name of Legina Brown, whose son Joshua was killed in an automobile accident a few years ago, and because of that, you know, Joshua's law was passed, which is a great thing. Joshua's law was to add a surcharge to traffic fines. Those monies are supposed to go for driver's training in Georgia. Great idea and a great way to honor this young man. The problem is, $56 million has been collected under Joshua's law. $8 million has been spent on driver's training. Where did the rest go? Legislators took that money and they put it in the general fund and they spent it on whatever they wanted to. Things like bass fishing museums in Bonaire, Georgia, the home of the last governor. I got a problem with that. It's the same thing, and it's not just Joshua's law. There's a whole list of special taxes that you pay, or fees or fines or surcharges, like the $3 it goes when you get a set of tires. There's a $3 landfill fee. That money, again, doesn't go to preserve the environment. It goes to the general fund so they can spend it on pet projects for legislators. It's time to stop this deceptive taxation. I want to talk just a minute about transportation. And I know you got Jeff here, and both of us have had some experience on the State Transportation Board. We have got to find a way to fund transportation in this state. We're 49th per capita. Only Tennessee spends less per capita on transportation in the state of Georgia. We cannot afford to continue to kick the can down the road, like tax reform and some of these other issues that we always seem to, well, we'll just do that next year. Well, we'll do that next session. Well, we can't do that anymore. Georgia has already begun to lose their competitive edge. Industry are already talking, or not already talking about, but are leaving this state or not coming to this state because of the congestion problem. T-Splost is a tough call. The polling data that I saw from last week shows 62% of Republicans oppose the T-Splost. Yeah, I'm pretty convinced that it's not going to pass in this region. I'm pretty convinced it's not going to pass in most regions. Question is, who has the experience, who has the understanding, who has the knowledge, where we go when should it not pass, should it fail? I think I have that experience. I have a lifelong history as a fiscal conservative. Back on my days of the county commission, property taxes, the millage rate, the total millage rate for Floyd County, lowest in 30 years. I'm happy to receive the endorsement of the Georgia Right to Life yesterday, and I have the full support endorsement of the Lieutenant Governor of this state, Casey Cagle. With that, I'll pause. I don't know how much time we got, or
about 12 minutes.
I'd be glad to entertain some questions about anything. And yes, sir.
Well, you mentioned taking those basically hidden taxes and making sure that they go to what they're supposed to, but according to the Georgia Constitution, you can't do that because you can't keep take a designated tax like the Joshua's law and help hold a future legislation to do that without a constitutional amendment, making it go that way. So how do you propose to make that happen?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry.
You can't earmark.
You can't earmark taxes in this state, according to the Georgia Constitution, that it has to go, just like the Joshua's law, it was supposed to go to driver's training. You can't do that in this state. It sounds good and everything, but according to Georgia Constitution, that goes into the general fund no matter what. And even though that the current legislature may say, hey, let's make it this way, as soon as the next legislature comes about, they can say, we'd rather use it for this. And you can't force that.
Well, I've never seen this law challenged constitutionally, so I would have to respectfully say I can't imagine that if this law was unconstitutional, it had already been challenged or stopped.
Because the same thing with the driver's
Right.
the plates. You take a choose life, it's supposed to go to this. It really doesn't. It goes into the general fund.
Well, I have a problem with holding ourselves out to the public and saying, I'm gonna take a fee from you for this purpose, and then spending it on something else. If we can't do
Right.
that, if we can't take your tax money, and that's really what it is, it's a tax. If we can't take your tax money under a law, so we're gonna take it and use it for this and do something else with it, then we need to abolish that.
Right. So how?
And
how are
Lugina
you gonna
Brown
do
has
that?
said that. She said, you know what, if you can't stop this practice of taking this money and putting it in the general fund in my son's name and honor, then I want you to do away with the tax. I said, I'll do that.
Right. So basically, do away with the taxes is, I guess.
Right, but I'm gonna have to, I'd be surprised if that's unconstitutional. I mean, it could be.
Kind of a two-part question. You mentioned Lieutenant Governor Cagle. I know that everybody's aware of an ongoing battle with Cagle trying to get back some power that was deemed essentially unconstitutional and that he didn't have to start with. And so, first, talk about the Lieutenant Governor's role as far as you see it, and in that same vein, can you explain what everybody's heard? Can you just talk about your support of Roy Barnes in the last gubernatorial election?
Sure, glad to. First about the Lieutenant Governor. Again, I don't know where these, how you say his powers aren't constitutional. The Lieutenant Governor only has one constitutional duty, and that is to be the presiding officer and the President of the Senate. It's been that way since the Georgia Constitution. There is a couple of members of the legislature who have persuaded the caucus to strip the Lieutenant Governor of his powers and decide to run the state Senate by caucus. If you will, all you have to do is look at the last 2 years and see what a miserable affair that has been. My dad was in the state Senate in the 70s and early 80s. He told me that that had been tried back in the 80s when Lester Maddox was Lieutenant Governor. They stripped him of his powers, said it was a complete and miserable failure. I think it has been done once since then, and it's being done now. And if you'll look and see, the governor, the speaker have thrown their hands up in frustration. We don't know who's in charge. One day it's this senator, one day it's this senator, one day it's this senator. I have a problem. The Lieutenant Governor is elected by 8 million Georgians. The folks who want to take his power away or have taken his power away are elected by 6,000 or 8,000 folks in their local district. If they want to be the Lieutenant Governor, put down your money and go run for Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor needs to run the state Senate.
Who's in charge of the U.S. Senate?
The Vice President.
So he makes all the judgment as far as who gets on committees and all that in the U.S. Senate?
I'm not running for the United States Senate. I can't tell you the rules of the United States Senate. I don't know. Back the question about Roy Barnes. Let's answer that one. I was a Democrat until 2002. I'm sorry, 2005. 2005, I changed parties. And if you're over about age 40, like, I'm well over age 40, most of you at one time voted for a Democrat. Well, probably were one, because 20 years ago, there weren't very many Republicans. I changed in 2005, and every election since 2005, I have pulled a Republican ballot. Roy Barnes has been a family friend for over 30 years. He was my attorney when I was county commission chairman. I gave him a $1,000 donation in 2010 for the Democratic primary. I did not give him $1,000 to run against Republicans. It was in the Democratic primary. I have supported Republican candidates, just like Sonny Perdue used to be a Democrat, just like Nathan Deal used to be a Democrat, probably about a third of the legislature used to be a Democrat. I used to be a Democrat. But the difference is, when I changed parties, I stayed hitched. And I have been a Republican ever since. I have had fundraisers and wrote checks and supported everybody from Sonny Perdue to Phil Gingrey to Lynn Westmoreland, local and state reps, they can't question where I've been since 2005. You know, Roy Barnes is a friend. I'm not going to deny that. And I'm the kind of guy that I place friendship over politics. He's my friend. He appointed me to 2 state commissions when he was governor. One of them was a commission on children and youth. The Georgia Children's Trust Fund Commission, in which I was able to help bring money back to Bartow County and to Floyd County for child abuse issues, something I've worked in for the last 30 years. So I make no excuses for being a friend of Roy Barnes. Mine and his politics don't agree, you know. Other questions? Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. I ask for your vote on July the 31st. Thank you so much.